It's Sunday and it's snowing out there. Oh, it's not snowing. We've got about 10 inches of snow. We keep getting blown in. We have what they call ground blizzards, where it's so flat here that the snow just moves across the fields, and our driveway is between two fields, so we're blown in pretty good. So let's go ahead and get started. This is chapter 5. We're going to talk about Adlerian therapy. Um, One of the things that I don't know that I've said this before, but I can't really teach you how to use these therapy techniques. All I'm trying to do is introduce them to you so that when somebody says Adlerian therapy, that means family therapy, that he looks at inferiority complexes. He is big on sibling rivalry, and birth order is important to Adler. And that's really all that I'm trying to do. I can't really teach you to be a Freudian psychoanalyst or a Adlerian family therapist. But let's go ahead and get started. And we're going to be covering these fairly quickly. I mean, we're only going to be working on them for a week, and then we're going to go to the next therapy technique. So let's go ahead and get started. Adlerian therapy, as I said, was big on the family. So let's go ahead and get started. Adler was part of the Wednesday night circle that Freud put together, and part of the time they met at a guest house, which is a pub or a bar, and part of the time they met at Freud's house. These were all psychologists or medical doctors, actually. Most of them were medical doctors that lived in Vienna, Austria. And they became very famous. The Wednesday night circle became very famous. And one of the great things about the Wednesday night circle was that there was a lot of conversation, and they were talking about development and why people had mental illnesses and whatnot. And this was the first group that ever did anything like that. So it was pretty intense. Adler was one of the group, and he used to argue with Freud all the time. Well, I'll show you the difference between Adler and Freud. Freud was tall and good looking, and Adler was short. He had a deformity. He had had rickets when he was a child, and one of his legs was shorter than the other. So Adler had some problems. He was also a surgeon, and during World War One, Freud actually didn't participate. His two sons did, but he didn't participate. But Adler did. He was a combat surgeon for the Austrian army. And it turned out that, of course, that Adler was Freud's harshest critic. Freud could not placate Adler. Adler was very serious. He would not agree with the fact that sex was a driving force. Now you have to remember that this is at the end of the 19th century and the beginning of the 20th century, and sexual repression was a very social thing that happened. So, as part of the conservative movement, this whole Victorian idea that sex is somewhere in the background, and everything else is more important than sex. Freud even backs Adler for a nomination to the presidency of the Vienna Psychoanalytic Society. Didn't do much good. That's what Adler looked like. It was a kind of a interesting looking fellow, and of course Freud was such a good looking guy. Very, very different individuals. Adler felt that there was far more to life than our sexual animal instincts. Adler believed that an individual's direction was established in the first 6 years of life. To Adler, striving to go and be was more important than where we came from. Humans are both the creators and the creation of their own lives. people develop a unique style of living that is both a movement toward and an expression of their selected goals. Thus, we create ourselves rather than merely being shaped by our childhood experiences. We are in charge, not our childhood experiences. According to Adler, humans are motivated primarily by social relatedness rather than by sexual urges. Behavior is purposeful and goal directed. Consciousness, not unconscious, is the focus of therapy. Adler stresses choice and responsibility, meaning in life, striving for success, completion, and perfection. Adler felt that inferiority feelings was a normal condition of all people and a source of all human striving. Inferiority serves as the wellspring of human creativity. It motivates us to strive for mastery. It motivates us to seek success or superiority. It motivates us to work toward completion. It is the impetus to make us move forward to rid ourselves of feeling inferior. So as far as Freud was concerned, it was the libido. As far as Adler was concerned, it was this feeling of inferiority that drove you forward. Adlerians attempt to view the world from the client's subjective frame of reference. This orientation is called phenomenological. It is phenomenological in that it pays attention to the individual way in which the person perceives the world. This subjective reality includes the individual's perceptions, their thoughts, their feelings, values, beliefs, convictions, and conclusions. How life is in reality is less important than how the individual believes life to be. This phenomenological approach to reality has been adopted by other perspectives, including Gestalt therapy, existential therapy, person-centered therapy, the cognitive behavioral therapies, reality therapy, and some systematic constructivist therapies. And these are all the therapies that we're going to be dealing with in the near future. Personality can only be understood holistically and systematically. The individual is seen as an invisible whole, born, reared, and living in specific familial, social, and cultural context. It is impossible to understand a person outside these basic contexts. An individual's thoughts, feelings, beliefs, convictions, attitudes, character, and actions are expressions of their uniqueness. This is all reflected in a self-selected life goal. And because a person's life is interrelated with their network of cultural and social systems, there is more focus on interpersonal relationships than internal psychodynamics. All behavior has a purpose. Behavior reflects goals. So what we are striving for is crucial. Adlerians are interested in the future as well as the importance of past influences. Decisions are made on past experiences, the present situation, the direction in which the person is moving. Continuity in a person's life is represented by themes that run throughout a person's life. Montfort had lots of what he considered good ideas, but he grew up in a family where no one listened to him. Throughout his life, Montfort strove to acquire expertise so people would accept what he said. Finally, in his 50s, Montfort was able to earn a PhD to acquire the ultimate certificate of expertise. Now Montfort was able to face his family with confidence. Montfort's need for expertise was his fictional finalism, fiction that guided his life. Fictional finalism refers to the imagined central goal that guides a person's behavior. Fictional finalism refers to not how the world is, but how the world should be. It represents a fictional goal, a perfected position. The concept of finalism is that the individual strives to achieve this end in everything that they do. This gives the individual the power to choose what they perceive as the truth, how they will behave, how they will interpret events. Jerry was elected to the city council running on the platform, "There is only one definition of right, and that is the truth." On the council, Jerry was not able to get anything done because he refused to compromise. Unfortunately, one of Jerry's truths was that all Northsiders were lazy welfare bums, so he wouldn't allocate any funding to improve conditions north of the tracks. Way to go, Jerry. According to Adler, the reason we seek significance and superiority is because we feel inferior. It is innate, a natural genetic drive for individuals to seek mastery, to dissipate feelings of inferiority. All human struggle can be seen as a constant struggle to grow beyond one's inferiorities by compensating for the deficit. Adler feels that the feeling of inferiority pushes us to seek mastery and achieve superiority. Adler's use of superiority means gaining dominance over a task, not dominance over others. Adler uses the word lifestyle in the context of the personality in its social and cultural context. Lifestyle is synonymous with a plan of life, a strategy for living, a roadmap of life. Lifestyle is the individual's characteristic way of moving toward their life goals. If a therapist understands an individual's lifestyle, they understand how behaviors fit together to provide consistency in their action. Martha worked with the Arizona Bureau of Investigation as a forensic psychologist. One of her jobs was to look at a series of clues in a case to find the perpetrator's lifestyle. Find the common thread that runs through a personality, and you will be able to identify the individual. These were the clues that Hannibal Lecter was giving Charisse in Silence of the Lambs. One of the basic differences between Adler and Freud was Adler's acceptance that social influences made a large impact on the personality of the individual. Thus, part of the root structure of the individual's personality was the degree of social interest and community feeling that shaped who the individual is. And this is this community feeling and social interest. For you, it would be your reservation community. For me, it would be my rural farmer mentality, and that's one of the reasons why I feel more comfortable living in Iowa, and you probably feel more comfortable living on the reservation rather than off the reservation. And of course, I was in the military I was in and around the military for over 30 years, and we lived in some really interesting places: Wichita Falls, Texas, Maryland. We lived in Washington Heights, Oxford. It was an old plantation. I can't think of the name. It was just north of Washington, D.C. We lived in Plattsmouth, Nebraska. We lived in Riverside, California. We lived in Northridge, California. We lived in Lubbock, Texas, Oklahoma City, Montana. Anyway, so but I'm from rural Indiana, which was farm country, and I feel more comfortable in rural farm country, and that's where I live right now. I live in the middle of a cornfield in Iowa. And that's part of my root structure. The socialization process begins in childhood and represents an individual's finding their place in society. As social interest develops, feelings of inferiority and alienation diminish. Those without community feeling and social interest become discouraged and end up on the useless side of life, according to Adler. So this is really kind of interesting if you think about it. You feel more comfortable living on the reservation, and I feel more comfortable here. This isn't where I grew up, but it's more like where I grew up than where I grew up is. It's not like what it was like when I grew up anyway. It's all built up. It was all farm country when I was growing up, and now it's mostly houses because that's the way the world works, I guess. Individual psychology rests on a central belief that our happiness and success are largely related to social connectedness. Because we are a part of a society, we cannot be understood in isolation from the social context. Humans have a basic need to feel secure, accepted, and worthwhile through our connection with our family and society. Many of the problems individuals experience are related to the fear of not being accepted by the groups that we value. Only when we have a sense of belonging are we able to act with courage in facing and dealing with our problems. Now, one of the interesting things about psychology and some of these theorists is the fact that these individuals are city people, and that's the only place they've ever lived. So when Freud is talking about society and when Adler's talking about society, they're talking about the society that they lived in. They look at other individuals, and most of the other individuals they're looking at are other city people. So when they're talking about society, I'm thinking rural Indiana or rural farm country. You're thinking reservation life, but these guys aren't really talking about that. They're talking about living in areas where Adler was Jewish, and so was Freud. So they're really talking about living in a Jewish community in Vienna, is what they're talking about. And what they discovered was that whether you're a Jewish person living in Vienna or you're a Lutheran living in Berlin, you would rather live around people that you're like, that are like you. So they're really talking about a homogeneous society, far more than a diverse society. And that's one of the things we discovered in the last election. Mossack, an Adlerian, contends that we must face and master the life tasks which are relating to others, friendships, making a contribution, work, achieving intimacy, love and family relationships, getting along with ourselves, self acceptance, developing our spiritual dimension, values, meaning, life goals, and our relationship with the universe or cosmos, defining our sex roles, learn to relate to others. And that's according to Mossack. Adler was the only psychologist to pay special attention to the relationship between siblings and the psychological birth position in one's family. Adler identified 5 birth positions. Now, this is really kind of interesting because back in the day, and when I talk about the day, I'm talking about when I was a kid, families were much larger than they are today. Today, if you find a family with more than 3 or 4 kids, then it's a large family. But back then, there were families of 13, 14 kids. There were families of 8 or 9. There were families of 6 or 7. My own family had six children in it. So this is really quite important as far as I'm concerned because I came from a large family. So oldest and all the rest of this stuff. This is all quite important to me. But I imagine that in today's society, with the blended families and with the much smaller families, that onlys are a huge thing. If there are 2 kids in the family, it's a lot. If there's 3 kids in the family, it's really massive. I remember when we were stationed in Germany back in the early 80s. Uh, Germans don't have very many kids, and we had we had neighbors that had 3 kids. 3 kids. And the neighbors would make fun of the father of that family because he was oversexed, they said. They teased him about being oversexed because he had more than 2 children. Most families had 2 children, and that was it. But if you had more than 2, they thought you were oversexed or something, uh, as weird as that is. Anyway, so Adler identified 5 birth positions, the oldest, of course, that is in a group of children. The second of only 2, and of course, I had only 2 children. So I have only 2 children. So that was very important to me. I am a middle child. I'm the 4th of 6. And I'm the second boy in the family, so I'm a middle child. There are two boys after me, but so I'm a middle child. The youngest child, of course, is the baby of the family, and then the onlys, and onlys are a special group. Actual birth order is not as important as the individual's interpretation of his or her place in the family. And of course, that is what we look at. So if it's a blended family, you might see yourself as the middle child. There are six kids in the. I have a friend who has seven children, but he only fathered three of them, I think. The other four are from another marriage, or the lady was married to another individual. But there are seven children in that family. So it's interesting because his three children see themselves as separate from the other four children, and the other four children see themselves separate from the other three. So they don't see themselves as seven children. They see themselves as a family of four and a family of three, as weird and strange as that may seem. So it really all depends on who you are. This is a good example would be Sigmund Freud. Freud was the offspring of a man who married, who had actually two families. His first family, his wife died. They had five children, I think, and then he married a 16-year-old. This man in his 30s or 40s married a lady that was only 16 years old, and that was Freud's mother. And she had six children by this individual. And Freud felt that he was the oldest person in the family, and he was treated as the oldest in the family because of the family structure. So it all depends on how you feel about your family and where you see yourself. The oldest child generally receives a good deal of attention. During the time that they are the only child, they are somewhat spoiled in the center of attention. They tend to be hardworking, dependable, and strive to keep ahead. When the new sibling appears, they are ousted from the favored position. They are no longer unique and special. Who's Who is full of firstborns, full of firstborns, as is the prison system. So these people are always striving for something, and sometimes it's bad, and sometimes it's very good. But so if you look at who's who, it's just chock full of firstborns, and if you look at the prison systems, it's chock full of firstborns as well. Uh, the oldest child generally. Oh, wait a minute. We didn't go anywhere. The second child of only two from the time of birth shares attention with another child. These children tend to behave as if they are in a race and generally are at full steam all the time. They are in a perpetual competition to surpass the older child. Their manner of behavior involves finding their older sibling's weak spots and gaining praise by achieving success where their sibling has failed. The second child is often the opposite of the firstborn. And this is exactly the way that my two kids are. My son was always competing with his older sister. And you would have to say that he's the opposite of her. The middle child often feels squeezed out. They may become convinced of the unfairness of life and feel cheated. This person can assume a poor me attitude and can become a problem child. However, in a family characterized by conflict, or when the conflict occurs, the middle child can become the switchboard and peacemaker, the person who holds things together. If there are four children in the family, the second born may become the middle child, and the third born will become more easygoing and more social and may align with the firstborn. And of course, this is about as true as it can get. If you pick on your younger siblings, then they tell you to stop. If the older child picks on you, then they tell you to stop tattling on the older child. That is about true. The youngest child is always the baby of the family and tends to be the most pampered one. This child has a special role to play since all the other children are ahead of them. Youngest children tend to go their own way. They often develop in ways no others have thought about. And of course, they are the ones that are unique. They will always seek uniqueness, and that is the essence of the youngest child is the fact that they need to be unique. The only child has special problems of their own. Although they tend to share some of the characteristics of the oldest child, high achieving and having a drive about them, they may not learn to share or cooperate with others. They tend to learn to relate to adults well, since adult is their family structure. Often the only child is pampered by her parents and may become dependently tied to one or both parents. They may want to have a center stage all the time. If their position is challenged, they may feel that it is unfair. And that is the problem with onlys. Birth order and the interpretation of one's position in the family has a great deal to do with how adults interact in the world. Individuals tend to develop a certain style of relating to others in childhood and form a definite picture of themselves that they carry into their adult interactions. Birth order and family dynamics assumes a key role in Adlerian therapy. While birth order profiling is not absolute, it can explain personality types in a general context. The Adlerian therapeutic process involves forming a relationship based on mutual respect and identifying, exploring, and disclosing mistaken goals and faulty assumptions within the client's style of living. The next step is re-educating toward the useful side of life. The therapist helps the client develop a sense of belonging by helping them adopt behaviors that foster community feeling and social interest. This is done by increasing the client's self-awareness and challenging and modifying their fundamental premises, life goals, and social interests. To an Adlerian therapist, their client is not sick and doesn't need to be cured. They are merely misguided and need to be re-educated. Therefore, the therapy is a process of providing information, teaching, guiding, offering encouragement to discourage clients. Encouragement is the most powerful method available for changing a person's beliefs. It helps clients build self-confidence and stimulates courage. Courage is a willingness to act even when fearful, in ways that are consistent with social interest. Adlerian counselors educate clients in new ways of looking at themselves, others, and life. Through the process of providing clients with a new cognitive map, counselors assist them in changing their perspective. A cognitive map is a fundamental understanding of the purpose of their behavior. The educational process of therapy includes fostering social interest, helping clients overcome feelings of discouragement and inferiority, changing clients' lifestyles, modifying their views and their goals, changing faulty motivation, assisting clients to feel a sense of equality with others, helping clients become contributing members of society. Clients are in need of therapy because they have become discouraged, they function ineffectively because of mistaken beliefs, faulty values, goals that focus on the useless side of life. Therapy is aimed at making the client feel and behave better if they discover and correct their basic mistakes. One of the Adlerian counselor's major functions is making a comprehensive assessment of the client's functioning. They use a questionnaire to gather information on the family constellation. Who are the parents? Who are the siblings? Are there others living in the home? The questionnaire provides a picture of the client's early social world. The counselor will use this information and the information they glean from their initial interview to develop a lifestyle assessment to create targets for possible therapy. The therapist's job is to look at the client and determine how they maintain their lifestyle and why they resist changing it. People fail to change because they don't recognize the errors in their thinking or the purposes of the behaviors. They fear leaving old comfortable patterns. They fear dealing with unpredictable outcomes. In therapy, clients explore private logic, concepts about self, others, and life that constitute the philosophy on which an individual's lifestyle is based. Tremaine is chronically depressed and middle-aged. After the lifestyle assessment is completed, these basic mistakes are identified. He has convinced himself that nobody could really love him. He rejects people before they have a chance to reject him. He is harshly critical of himself, expecting perfection. He has expectations that things will rarely work out well. He burdens himself with guilt because he is convinced he is letting everyone down. Tremaine may have developed these mistaken ideas about life when he was young, but he is still clinging to them as rules for living. His pessimistic expectations tend to be fulfilled because on some level he is seeking to validate his beliefs. His depression actually serves the purpose of helping him avoid contact with others, a life task at which he expects to fail. In therapy, the counselor will challenge the structure of Tremaine's private logic. Some of the logic is, I am basically unlovable. The world is full of people who are likely to be rejecting. Therefore, I must keep to myself so I won't be hurt. Tremaine's central themes are, I must control everything in my life, I must know everything there is to know, and a mistake would be catastrophic. I must be perfect in everything I do. It's easy to see how such logic can lead to depression. However, this man is using depression as an excuse for retreating from life. Adlerians see feelings as being aligned with thinking and as the fuel for behaving. Thinking leads to feeling, which leads to acting. Thus, therapy sessions are spent trying to discover the basis for the thinking and feeling to reorient the client in a useful way. In Tremaine's case, the therapist will point out his private logic and lifestyle concentration and encourage him to change. Adlerian counseling is centered around four central objectives: establishing the proper therapeutic relationship, developing rapport, exploring the psychological dynamics operating in the client, making the assessment, encouraging the development of self-understanding, insight into the purpose, helping the client make new choices, reorientation, and re-education. The client-therapist relationship is based on a sense of deep caring, involvement, and friendship. Clearly defined goals must be established by the client and the therapist in the caring atmosphere. The counseling process can only be effective if the therapist recognizes the needed goals and the client is willing to discuss the issues and change their behavior. While most therapists focus on the problem, Adlerian psychologists try to begin therapy by focusing on the person. It is important to the therapy that the therapist understand who the person is. Listening to the client requires the therapist to pay close attention to voice, posture, facial expressions, gestures, even hesitations in speech. It is important that the therapist accentuate the positive instead of focus on the negative. Clients usually enter therapy because they have a diminished sense of self-worth and self-respect. They lack faith in their ability to cope with life. Adlerians pay more attention to the subjective experiences of the client than they do to using techniques. This is Yana. Yana came to therapy because she tended to lose herself in her boyfriends. She seemed willing to change everything about herself just to please them. At her initial intake interview, all she could talk about was Jack, though sometimes she mentioned Jerry. She was very effusive, very outgoing, almost a stereotype of the flashy girlfriend. By the end of the interview with the intake counselor, he wasn't getting any information and she was mostly posing. The first thing Counselor Katrina said to Yana was, "What do you want me to know about you?" It took Yana a couple of minutes to respond. Usually a rabid talker, she suddenly seemed at a loss for words. Yana started talking about Jack, and Katrina stopped her. "No, Yana, tell me about you." Once again, Yana paused for a couple of minutes before replying in a much quieter and more subdued voice, "There really isn't much to tell. Usually there isn't much of the real me to even think about." Katrina leaned closer to Yana. "If when you are with Jack you don't feel like yourself, then I don't want to hear about you with Jack. Tell me about the real you." The therapist should proceed through the therapy using two different interviewing perspectives: subjective interviewing and objective interviewing. In subjective interviewing, the therapist uses empathic listening and responding to help the client tell their story. The therapist treats the client as an expert and asks questions of them about their lives as if they are listening to and asking questions of what they are, the most informed person about themselves. The Adlerian counselor is listening for clues to the purposive aspects of the client's coping and approaches to life. They are specifically looking for the answer to the question, how would your life be different, and what would you do differently if you did not have this symptom or problem? This is known as the question. So the question is, how would your life be different, and what would you do differently if you did not have this symptom or problem? That is the question. In this interview, the counselor is seeking information about how problems in the client's life began, any precipitating events, a medical history, including current and past medications, a social history, the reason of the client chose therapy at this time, the person's coping with life tasks, a lifestyle assessment. Family dynamics can be crucial in how people thought of themselves and how they think about themselves. The therapist should ask, who was the favorite child? What was your father's relationship with the children? Your mother's? Which child was most like the father and how? Which child was most like the mother and how? And how? Who among the children was the most different from you? In what ways? Who among the siblings was the most like you? In what ways? What were you like as a child? How did your parents get along? In what did they both agree? How did they handle disagreements? How did they discipline the children? Adler believed that an individual's earliest memories were selected because of their impact and importance. Therefore, the therapist might ask, I would like to hear about your earliest memories. Think back to when you were very young, as early as you can remember, and tell me something that happened at one time. The therapist is seeking to assess the person's convictions about self, others, life, and ethics, assess the client's stance in relation to the counseling session and the counseling relationship, verify coping patterns, assess individual strengths, assets, and interfering ideas. People tend to rely on a personality tendency as a first line of defense against a perceived stress or difficulty. There are four basic personality priorities: superiority or significance. They strive for significance through leadership or accomplishment to make them feel superior. Control. They strive to establish complete mastery over situations. They are willing to pay the price of social distancing to maintain control and safety. Comfort. People seek to avoid stress or pain at all cost. They delay dealing with problems or making decisions, and aim to please to avoid rejection. They seek constant approval and acceptance. In the first session and the next, Katrina discovered that Yana was the second oldest of 5 children. Her father left when she was 7, and her mother went into a deep depression. The only way Yana could get her mother to respond was to act the way her mother wanted her to act. There was constant competition between the sisters to please their mother for affection that was doled out sparingly. Since Yana identified more with her father, she tried to use the same charm to attract her mother's attention. Because she saw her absent husband in Yana's actions, her mother was at the same time drawn to and repelled by her behavior. Yana's earliest and happiest memories were of how happy her father was and how unhappy her mother was. One day when she was 3, she was playing with the baby, and when her father started playing with her. She remembers her mother coming in, followed by her oldest sister, and they had the same mean expressions on their faces. Even though the baby was laying in the crib watching Yana and her father play, the mother chastised them for not paying any attention to the baby. Later that evening, Yana's older sister told her that if she wanted to do the right thing, she had better start acting more like her mom than like her dad because her father was a grasshopper. Adlerians believe almost everything in human life has a purpose. Adlerians believe almost everything in human life has a purpose. Self-understanding is only possible when hidden purposes and goals of behavior are made conscious. Insight is an understanding of the motivations that operate in a client's life. The gaining of insight can be disclosed through well-timed interpretations. These interpretations focus on the here and now behavior and on the expectations and anticipations that arise from one's intentions. Adlerian disclosures and interpretations are concerned with creating awareness of one's direction in life, one's goals and purposes, one's private logic, and how it works in one's current behavior. Goal disclosure occurs whenever there is a need to make unconscious process conscious. Confronting resistance so that client and therapist goals can align, exploring the purposes of symptoms, feelings, behaviors, and human difficulties or blocks. Human behavior is social behavior. Assessing the social or interactive results of an individual's actions is the easiest way to discover goals and purposes and formulate a hypothesis for interpretations. Adlerian interpretations are suggestions presented tentatively in the form of open-ended sharing that can be explored in the sessions. They are hunches and guesses that are begun. It seems to me, could it be that? This is how it appears to me. Because they are presented in this manner, clients tend not to become defensive. Yana's progress was rapid because she had never known anyone who wanted to listen to the real her. She began speaking with a voice even she wasn't sure existed. Yana talked about her feelings and desires more in therapy than she had ever talked in her life. The first disclosure came after Yana mentioned how important making her mother and older sister like her was to her. Katrina said to her, "It seems to me, Yana, that you have been living your life trying to please the unpleasable, and that gave them the power to control you." Ooh, she wanted to please the unpleasable. Could it be that you react to men the same way, wanting to please them so you hide the real you? Yana replied, "If I act like me, then it won't be good enough. They will see that I am not worthy to be with them." Katrina countered, "Why do you feel that way?" When my mother's finally had enough of my father's foolishness, she threw him out, and she threatened to throw me out with him. If you want to be like him so much, just get out of this house. After that, I knew that if I acted like that, I would be acting like him. So ever since then, I have tried to be like people wanted me to be. Until Jack. It is because of Jack that I dyed my hair like a clown. The final stage of therapeutic process is the action-oriented phase known as reorientation and reeducation, putting insights into practice. This phase focuses on helping people discover new and more functional alternatives. Clients are both encouraged and challenged to develop courage to take risks and make changes in their life. Sorry, I needed a drink. Encouragement is the most distinctive Adlerian procedure, and it is central to all phases of counseling and therapy. Encouragement is especially helpful when people are considering frightening changes in their lives. Boo. Courage develops when people become aware of their strengths, when they feel they aren't alone, when they have a sense of hope and can see new possibilities for themselves and their daily living. During the reorientation phase of counseling, clients make decisions and modify their goals. They are encouraged to act as if they are the people they want to be, which can serve to challenge self-limiting assumptions. Clients are asked to catch themselves in the process of repeating old patterns that have led to ineffective behavior. This action-oriented phase is a time for solving problems and making decisions. Adlerian counselors seek to make a difference in their clients' lives. Adlerians use various techniques to promote change in their clients: immediacy, advice, humor, silence, paradoxical intention, confrontations, use of stories and fables, giving homework. When Yana came in for her 7th session, Katrina announced, "I think that it might be time for a change." "You mean dyeing my hair?" "I mean deciding who you are and who you want to be." "Are you sure I'm ready for that? I would hate to ruin a good thing with Jack." Katrina chuckled. "Yana, dear, he has you dressed and looking like a clown." Yana looked away. I like this look." Katrina's voice became a little sterner. "Yana, you are the one who called yourself a clown. I am just repeating what you said. But he likes it. But you don't." "It's time we explored new possibilities. I have arranged for you to begin working on your GED. I'm not smart. Everyone has always said that." Katrina looked at Yana kindly. "You have never allowed yourself to be smart. Besides, some of the smartest people I know are grasshoppers." Yana laughed, but then looked back seriously. "Grasshoppers fiddle and freeze to death. Grasshoppers create and bring joy to the world. There is a little grasshopper in all of us. Even me. I just bought a 4x4 Tundra. I'd like to have one of those. First we have to find your voice, and then we will find your truck." Way to go, Katrina. And there she is, Yana the clown. Okay, so what would Adler do with Stan? Adlerian goals working with Stan: establish and maintain a working relationship, explore Stan's dynamics, work with Stan to develop insight and understanding, help him see new alternatives and make new choices. The therapist must get a sense of how Stan has reacted to turning points in his life. Adlerians approach clients as equals, so the therapist focuses on Stan's feelings of being inferior to others. The counselor does a lifestyle assessment on Stan from his family history questionnaire, looking at the family dynamic. Since Stan has had suicidal ideations, this becomes a focus to determine if suicide is still a possibility that must be eliminated. Session questions probe current social relationships, current family relationships, work responsibilities, his perceived role as a man, his feelings about himself, his goals in life and priorities, his earliest memories. When I was 6, I went to school and was scared of the other kids and the teacher. I came home and told my mom that I didn't want to go back to school because I was scared. She called me a baby. After that, I felt horrible and even more scared. Another time, when I was 8, my family was visiting my grandparents. I was playing outside and some neighborhood kids hit me for no reason. We, we started fighting. And my mom came out and scolded me for being such a rough kid. She wouldn't believe me when I said that they started the fight. I felt angry and hurt that she didn't believe me. The therapist analyzes Stan's recollections and suggests you see life as frightening and unpredictably hostile. You feel that you cannot count on women. They are likely to be harsh, unbelieving, and uncaring. The therapist and Stan review the lifestyle assessment and determine some of Stan's mistaken conclusions. I must not get close to people or they will surely hurt me. Since my own parents didn't want to or love me, I'll never be desired or loved by anyone. If only I could become perfect, then maybe people would acknowledge and accept me. Being a man means never showing emotions. Stan develops insight and self-understanding. Stan sees that many of the things he does are attempts to control his world and keep painful feelings in check. Using alcohol, avoiding interpersonal relationships that are threatening, being unwilling to count on others for psychological support. These coping barriers that he has created have allowed him to maintain these mistaken syllogisms. I am unloved, insignificant, and do not count. The world is a threatening place, and life is unfair. I must find ways to protect myself and be safe. The therapist makes interpretations centering on Stan's lifestyle, his current direction, his goals and purposes, and his private logic works. Stan is given homework assignments that help him translate his insights into new behavior. This makes him an active participant in the therapy. Reorientation occurs at this point, and the therapist and Stan work together to develop alternative attitudes, beliefs, and actions. Stan recognizes that he has locked himself into patterns of negative behavior and feelings that have led to his current problems. He feels encouraged and realizes that he has the power to change his life. And that is Stan. Do it, Stan, do it. So I'll talk to you next week.